April 23rd, 2019 session, Food and Beverage Tax Advisory Commission meeting to order, and we will begin with our first item on the agenda, which is the City of Bloomington, and Mr. Reniason is here to present that item. Can we get, Michael, do you have a print off of the agenda? This is a draft. I don't know, do you have an extra? I'm gonna ask Sid. You just sit there, we'll go, and okay, I was just going to give it to Michael. Oh, Michael, here. I said it.
Reniason, Deputy Mayor for the city. Also behind me is Philippa Guthrie, our Corporation Counsel, and Jeff Underwood, our Controller, who can also provide some more technical information about this request. And also, I believe, Jeff Cockerell from the county and I would both like to give you a brief update verbally about what happened last week during the design charrette, but we'll start with the request first, and then at your pleasure, we can fill you in a little bit about some of the design charrette details that happened last week. So the request before you is for funding, for approval of the funding for bond counsel and a financial advisor for the Convention and Civic Center. And a while back when the city and the county were working together, as we continue to, by the way, that hasn't stopped, just wanted to mention that we both interviewed both financial advisors and bond counsel, and we both agreed on the bond counsel, that's Barnes and Thornburg. And then because the project's going forward with funds from the city, the county allowed the city to make the decision on the financial advisor, and we've chosen O.W. Crone and Associates. So these two entities together would be the group that estimates the amount of bond capacity we'll have with the food and beverage tax from the city side, identifies any other funding sources that might be required if there are additional costs related to the project, and brings that information forward as the project moves along. So what we'd like this group to do is approve this as an appropriate expenditure of Food and Beverage Commission funds, and then we'd go to the City Council in May to ask for them to appropriate the funds for the project. These are not to exceed amounts, just for your information. 120,000, I think, is the request for bond counsel, thank you, and 80,000 for the financial advisor, so a not to exceed amount of approximately $200,000. And with that, Jeff or Philippa, does anybody in the back want to add anything to that request that I haven't mentioned? They're not saying anything, so I'll be happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Reniason?
I am totally new to the bond process. I read through this and I had a couple of questions about it. Everything looked good. Sort of when we got down near the bottom, they're talking about what is included in the work that they are going to do. What is defense of outstanding debt? Do you know?
I'm going to defer to the back. Push that light on.
Thanks.
Yes. It's defeasance of outstanding debt. The county has two outstanding issues that are funded through the innkeeper's tax at this time. And the thought was we would look to retire those debts and fold them into the new bond for the expansion of the convention center.
Okay, good. Second question is at the very end of this. It's about the fees for this, and it says these fees may be reimbursed by bond proceeds at a later date. Is that typical and customary, or?
Yes. Typically, units of government will have to expend funds in advance of the actual closing of the bonds. So Indiana statute allows you to be reimbursed for those costs up front, including your financial advisor and bond counsel.
Okay, super. That's it for me.
Thank you. I might, just to be clear, and I think the key responsibility here is to assure that the expenditures are related to appropriate activities. I guess I want to just make sure that the funds that we would approve that would come through this body would be dedicated to financial advice and bond counsel work directly related to the convention center. It won't relate to other projects or other things that we'd have to worry about. Are they appropriate uses of the money? But these contracts would be specifically dedicated to services related to the convention center project. Is that right?
Scopes of services, but basically engagement letters for both firms that lay out specifically it would only be related to the convention center.
Good, thank you.
Draw our attention to some process things. As we work out how we're going to sort of operate as a commission, it was a part of our discussion the last time we met, which was a couple of months ago, how we wanted to look at each of the items presented. And one of the requests was to make sure that whatever body, whether it came from the executive body of the county or the legislative body of the city, that we would have that voting record. And we do have that. It was unanimous in support for this to come before the Food and Beverage Commission from the City Common Council. And I just wanted to draw attention to that. We'll have that included in requests going forward, depending on who is making that request.
Another question. It was brought to my attention, someone who knew I was on this commission came up and asked me, it was their understanding that it was supposed to work kind of the other way, that the statute actually said that the financial bodies of the city and the county should vote on it, and then it comes to us for approval. And I just wanted to kind of get some reassurance. That's not what I understood, but I wasn't.
That's actually what's happened.
Okay.
So to bring it here.
The county commissioners will be the body that initiates a request to come before you for your action. If you approve it, then it goes to the county council, which is the fiscal body, to appropriate the money. So
And in all your great legal minds, that's how the statute is written, and we're good to go, right?
Council makes the request to the Food and Beverage Commission. If you authorize it, then the City Council approves the appropriation after that. And so that's the process we followed, and that's what's noted in this request from April 3rd's minutes from the City Council, that the City Council asked us to bring this to you, then it goes back to them.
And that is spelled out in statute. They are the legislative body. The county council is the fiscal body.
Sounds great. Just wanted to make sure so that I can reassure them
Sure.
that we're following the rules.
Any other questions? We'll do a voice vote.
We need a motion.
Oh, yes, we need a motion.
I move approval of the request for funds as listed on the agenda, item 1.
Any additional comments? Any comments from the public? Seeing,
I'd request a roll call vote on this.
yes, we'll do a roll call vote. Be great. Do you want to call, who wants to call roll? I'll do it. Is that, I mean, can I do that? Can I call the roll?
Lenny Bush,
Thank you.
Aye.
Michael Satili,
How about Tony?
Tony Satili, I'm sorry.
Aye.
We're going to change your name.
Shelley Yoder,
Aye.
and Mayor Hamilton.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous.
The next agenda item really kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. It's guidelines for the submission of funding approval requests to the Food and Beverage Advisory Commission. And, oh, yes.
It may be a good time, I think I heard the deputy mayor offer, and maybe some from the county too, to, maybe we want to do it after this, but to update on what has happened with the convention center, the contracts that we already have approved to hire the architects. They had a big week last week, and it might be useful just to update on what's going on, but if you prefer timing on it before or
Now
after that.
is perfectly fine.
The steering committee met last week. There were 3 days of design charrettes that were held in collaboration and all conducted by the architectural firm Convergence and Smith Associates. open public forums, a very drop-in style all 3 days where members of the public stopped in while drawings were being done that reflected input, and the drawings were done on all of the sites available for the expansion of the convention center. So the plan was to try to identify the best options for locating the exhibit hall, the meeting room space, the parking structures, potential hotel or hotels, all the amenities that go around, and connecting those to the existing convention center. The first day resulted in about 6 plans. 3 of those were nixed at the end of the day. The next day, there were more plans. I think 3 more got back on the board that were kind of different, and then those were called down. And then by the final day, it was kind of you could see kind of an emerging trend about where the likelihood of some of the facilities were going to locate. So very engaged members of the public came, and a very exciting process that allowed for maximum ideas. And again, it was mostly site planning, nothing about what it's going to look like or the functional space and exactly how each room was going to look. That's for a later step, at really identifying the best use of the area and site planning the location. So I'd offer that, and then Jeff, you want to offer what your impressions were and anything else you'd like to share?
It's interesting because the final round all had the kind of the convention center on the parcel just north of the current convention center, and the anchor hotel on the parcel between College and Walnut. So I think even with all the renditions, and again, I think they had 4 different ways to do it at the end, they were all pretty consistent on where those 2 things were going. I think the final day also showed, you know, kind of what we can get with our current budget, what we would have to do in order to get kind of something more expansive. So I think those were extremely interesting. I know that the architect is going through kind of some mechanics of cleaning it up, and it'll soon be on the convention center blog site. So you and the public can look at it and see kind of what the final few options are. I would say that 3 of the 4 are kind of the basics are the same, in that the exhibition hall is going to go in this general area and it'd be this general size, and the hotel is going to go in this general area. But they each have one kind of difference to them. I mean, one was kind of an arts garden, kind of like they have in Indianapolis. One was closing off 3rd Street and see what that would look like, and one was kind of how does it interact with the B line, and how does it, you know, the sight lines to the courthouse, and much more of maybe more of your standard, what I thought we were going to get out of it, as opposed to the 2 options that had, you know, really some real uniqueness to them.
Today will allow us to take the architectural site plan renderings, the early cost estimates, and drill down and see what we can afford with the food and beverage tax resources and other resources the city and county might choose to use. Like everybody who's built anything, we want more than we can afford, and I'm sure we'll have to come to terms with what's best for the community and best for the resources. And we anticipate the architectural firm coming back in May to bring back kind of a distilled looking plan, and then we really start to drill down into the next phase, which will be the actual design, schematic design, followed by design development and bidding and constructing, all a while away yet, and a lot more public engagement. But those are the next steps, and we thought you all would want to at least get a sense for what's happening, with the first step coming always to you for approval, and then going to the fiscal bodies for their approval. And there is work product being done, and I think you should be happy that it's moving forward, and it's moving forward in a nice way at this point from our perspectives. I think there's a lot of good ideas.
You know, while we were talking about the architectural, another key component of this first round of analysis is a market feasibility study done by Rod Hunden, and that should be completed in May, and I assume it made available to the public to look at and review, just to kind of see, you know, kind of if this is built, what's the market look like, on what can the expectations be. And I think that's a big component of this as well, and I don't want that to be overshadowed by look where all the buildings are going to go, because the driver of that is also being looked at very thoroughly.
Well, let's see if we have questions. Yes. Tony.
Thank you. Thank you. I know there's not a budget yet to determine total cost, but with the spending that we've approved thus far, is that something the city or the county is keeping record of? And at that point, as expenditures start being spent more regularly, would this committee be able to see a copy of that in order to determine what we have spent the money on thus far before budgeting takes place?
Sure, we have a separate fund, each the city and the county do, for the food and beverage tax proceeds that we receive. Since most of the spending to date's come out of the city side, we'd be happy to have our controller put together an update on what's been spent. And remembering too that as you've seen now a year's worth of collections, that it's actually come in sort of at or above what the anticipated revenue projection was. And that first round of revenue collections is what we've been using for these early startup costs. The future rounds would be used for debt service and other expenditures related to the project. But happy to share that. I'm not even going to turn around and look at Jeff. I'm just going to say, he left, but I'll tell him that, oh, is he right behind me? Yeah, we'll be happy to bring that and show you whenever you request that.
Other comments or questions?
Like that as a monthly report, or report, even if you don't have monthly meetings set up, but just anytime there's a meeting to give a running tally on where things stand?
When we do have meetings, it generally, as we have been having our meetings, it means that we're going to have a vote, and so it would be nice to know what have we spent so far. So maybe when we have meetings, that would be a good idea, something to include.
I might suggest, and we'll get to this later, it's actually not on the agenda, the fiscal report or the auditor's report, but I do think having a kind of an integrated financial picture that both shows in a useful, both to the public and to us, way of the income side, everything that we've got, and then on the expense side, everything we've spent. It has the balances in the two accounts, the county and the city account, you know, just as a standard report. And I would think that they all ought to be kind of tied together as one report on the fiscal side of that.
So I just want to make sure I hear you correctly, Mayor. You would like to have included an up-to-date, the report that we get sent on the collection, have that included in the packet?
Yeah, I think
To
what
date,
I'm
not
asking
just
is that we have an integrated report from the various parties that shows the income collected, the balances in the accounts, and maybe any expenditures in the month or whatever the most recent period was, so we don't have one sheet that's showing income from one office and then another sheet that's showing expenditure. Let's just get our people together to give one report.
It's a great
Does that make
idea.
sense?
We'll make sure that that gets back to the auditor and ask them to pull together a report that reflects that. Thank you.
I think we can work well with the controller's office to see what's a good way to get the information collated so it makes sense for it all to be in one place. Here's your receipts, here's your expenditures.
Any other questions or comments about the process and the exciting things that have been happening thus far?
I'd just also like to thank the county and the city. I think it's been a very important 6 or 8 weeks of work that we have let happen and helped make happen with progress on the convention center. It was an exciting week last week, but that really reflects 2 months or more of work with the architects and the county and the city working together on this planning has been very positive, and want to welcome that. And this group, which is responsible to approve that funding, should be very proud of getting that effort going, I think. So thanks.
Thank you. The last thing on our agenda is, well, we do have the minutes, but wanted to review just the guidelines for submission to fund any requests from either the city or the county. And you did receive a draft. I hope you had a chance to read through that. Any comments or additions that you would like to see? Yes, Mayor.
I think this is helpful. I think the most important language, which I might encourage we put in this for us, is the statutory language, and I'm not going to be able to quote it, but that outlines what are the purposes to which these funds can be used. And I don't think that's on here, but I think just being able for us to remember, you know, for expansion of a convention center or related tourism and other, I don't know the exact language, but I just like to see that so that we always have that in front of us to remember that's the kind of driving purpose for this group.
Sure.
I would like to see that added to the actual request form as a reminder. We could put that language there, and then we would see it in our packet, because the actual request would be in the packet.
Clear. Is this draft the entire text, the draft, or is this some of this just descriptive and only part of this text will actually be the guideline? Is this whole thing as is the guideline, or is it?
It was pretty much a draft to get some of the ideas that had been tossed around at the last meeting on paper.
No, all I meant to ask was, like, is the entire text intended to be the guideline, or is some of this just describing what the actual guidelines are? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, is it only like the 1, 2, 3, 4 that are the guidelines, or is the whole document the guidelines? I just wanted to clarify.
Well, I think the 1 and 2, the first half kind of gives some of the background and purpose that the mayor is actually asking to be expanded with a statutory site. So I don't see any reason that that can't be part of the, that's more of a guideline to me.
I'm not recommending anything. I'm just trying to understand what the document is that I'm reading, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to assume that all the text is part of the guideline.
Those that will be on some form, I imagine, that we'll get, and it'll have items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the rest is illustrative or something, I guess.
Is this the document that would be the cover page for the application?
That's kind of the way I envisioned it when I put this together. It sprang from questions that actually Lenny, well, we started off last time's meeting with kind of a general statement that you had some proposals that were coming to you, and there were questions about how much background information you had received and what you had to work with before the meeting took place. So we had that initial discussion, and I think Lenny asked questions exactly along the same line as we got into it. And as we did get into it, the deputy mayor, when he gave his proposal, kind of mapped out everything and was able to do it because of his thorough knowledge of what the purposes were and amounts and everything else. So he handled it at the meeting. The idea was just to get some of that information on a form that is sent to you in the packet so you can review it beforehand. Also, there's a concern to make certain there are fiscal bodies and legislative bodies. The county council and the city council actually appropriate this money. You don't appropriate, but you make a recommendation. So we were making sure that there weren't turf questions or limits of authority questions that would arise with this. But we were, but we were also trying to get the idea across that you are making a recommendation, which is not rubber stamping anything that comes in front of you that you need, because you've obviously got customers or people that you're talking to in the public who are saying, but I thought it worked this way, or have you thought of this? So to help you do your job as you're sitting here better, more responsibly, to get the kind of information and background out in front of you, even though you don't make the final appropriation of dollars.
In the way that, so I understand it, it's 3 checks and balances. First, whichever appropriate body, whether the city or the county, first it's, do we want to submit a request to the Food and Beverage Advisory Commission? So there's one hoop to jump through of deciding. Then it comes to us and we have a discussion and decide, is this in line with what the statute says that we can cover? Yes. And then it goes back to whichever appropriate body will vote on the appropriation, and that's a third level of checks and balances before it actually gets written. So we have many opportunities to look at this and make sure that it's an expense that we want to pay for with food and beverage income.
No, for me, the reason why I brought it all up was I wasn't exactly sure what the procedure was going to be to do this. So I think it's great that we have a document that goes, this is what you have, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and everyone kind of knows their ground rules and parameters.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move to our last agenda item, which is approval of our minutes from our last meeting, which was January 22nd, 2019. Hopefully you had a chance to read through those. Does anybody have any questions? That's okay. You can abstain. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And Counselor Volan abstains. Any questions, comments?
I know it's not on the agenda, but with your indulgence, I would like to just talk for a minute about the financial report, which I think should be a regular topic on the agenda. I mean, we did get sent the update. And do we normally expect the auditor to be here? Do we know? Or I don't know the right way to ask that question, but.
He or she, the deputy or the auditor, has been here at every meeting, so
Right.
my assumption was that they would be here. We'll
Okay.
follow up. We'll just make sure. I would like them to be here because it's good to be able to ask them questions.
Yeah, I had a couple questions, and I want to make, just note, this is really important, the report, we haven't met since January, so it's been, I guess, 3 months since we met. And they shared the distribution report. I think, as I mentioned before, I think it would be helpful to, and maybe our controller can collaborate to kind of assemble the financial report in a way that makes sense, both on the receipts side, income side, expenditure side, balance statements on the accounts would be useful for us, I think, just to get to get to see. I did a quick look, and I think over the last 12 months, this would be the kind of thing that I think could be helpful to see. Over the last 12 months, we averaged about $270,000 a month of revenue. That's kind of from April 18 through March 19. That's good. That's a number that's would generate over $3 million a year, 3.2 or something like that, I think it was. The initial couple months in 18 were a little lower than that, February and March, but that's a healthy pace, and it would be important, I think, kind of graphically also just to see this April versus last April, this May versus last May, just maybe some graphical representations that would let us, without doing a lot of math in our heads or on our phone, those kind of things. One of the questions I did have, and I don't know if anybody here knows, so the distribution in 2019 is not a consistent, at least what quick math, is not a consistent split between city and county. So I don't know if it is now reflecting an actual allocation of the 400 plus entities reporting. Are each of them being assigned to city or county based on location? Does anybody know that?
Yes, I think in December when we, as I recall from the auditor, they receive an actual adjustment of what the split is. And then that split will be used through the year until we get another in December. I guess we'll find out what the actual split is, and it will be adjusted. Do you know how?
I don't think that's what's going on with this one, but maybe we know.
The MOU between the city and the county says that the revenues will be split 90-10, and then there'll be a reconciliation in December, and any adjustments would be made either to increase or decrease that last distribution. Those calculations are all done by the county. They're not done by the state. The state reports gross revenues. The county auditor goes in and looks at the detail and splits those up between the city and the county.
So anyway, I just noted on the 3 from 2019, let me just finish my quick math here, but
I get 10.85% for January, 12% for February, and 8.2% for March. So I think I'm guessing that it reflects actual dollars collected in the county versus the city.
well, I don't want to guess though.
I don't either. I'm just saying
Because,
that we have
yeah,
very little to go on.
I would be surprised if there, anyway, I just
Yeah.
think it would be important to know it is, and the adjustments make sense to do it as we did at the end of 18. I just don't understand exactly what these numbers are, which I'm sure we can get informed about that. I just think it would be useful to know that as it goes, so.
The last communication that we had when this was in December is that they would continue to do the 90-10 and then settle up in December, which follows the MOU.
And the other thing I guess I want to ask is, and to let folks know that we did get, I don't want to state this incorrectly, the state has approved the permission for us as a county to give Jeff Underwood as city controller the ability to be included in the financials. But that paperwork has not been done yet from the county, or we're waiting to hear from it, because I know we need to, you need to go through some training and get something signed.
The paperwork's done. I think it's just a matter of arranging the training for both the auditor staff and the city staff to go through it, because the confidentiality agreement requires that to happen before allowing access to the information. And we're just, I talked with the chief deputy in the auditor's office today. We're going to meet with Kathy tomorrow to figure out a time and just get it scheduled.
Okay, so the paperwork's filed to get him in?
Yes.
Great, great.
Mr.
That'll be helpful. Thanks. That's it.
Sense of when that training will happen? Can it happen?
Is it online or is it in person? Does anybody know?
I mean, can we make it happen before the next meeting, say?
Don't quote me on this, but my conversation with the state, it made me think that it was probably some kind of online training session that they have assigned into, that, you know, you go through it and it's all done. It can all be done at your computer. It's all, you know, kind of a hour long, just basically, I assume it's just trying to scare people into not giving out any of this information at any point in time for any reasons that's inappropriate.
Trying to ask, can we, who authorizes it? Can we?
It should not take that long to schedule the training, and it should be done well before the
Are you
next meeting.
scheduling the training?
I have offered, and if they need me to schedule it, I can, but it's a matter
Who's
of...
they?
The auditor's office
Okay.
is the ones who should be scheduling it, because they've got a lot of people that have to go through it. Pretty much their financial side has to.
Okay.
So just logistically, it makes sense for them to schedule it and call Jeff and make sure he's available at that time, or
Great.
figure out a time he's available than
Thank
me
you.
trying to figure all that out.
Thank you. We will see you in May. And with that, we are adjourned.